So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for August 14th, 2019. We're going to follow our standard outline with a tweak to get an update on one of our strategic initiatives earlier on. But first, let's start out with if there's any announcements that people would like to share.
Someone should announce the security release coming out tomorrow.
Sam, you want to add, since you've been working on that one, add anything to that?
And Sam, if you're talking, you're muted. Okay, well, in that case, there's a security release coming out UTC Thursday, so sometime like 24 hours from now-ish, give or take 24 hours, and it involves all the HTTP2 denial of service stuff that was disclosed via Netflix, I think, yesterday.
Yeah, and links. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done. You go finish up.
Links and details are available either through a message in the Node.js security mailing list and on the main website as well. If you go there, so if you want to follow the links, they're there to get all the details. Okay, any other announcements that people have? But I'm just taking a note here. List and Node.js.org. Okay, so let's flip over then to just the strategic update and the work on Python. Christian, if you want to give us a quick update on that.
Sure. So I'm working off of notes that are in the Node issue 25789. So if you want to follow along there, you can. But in general, I think we're actually very close after a very long series of issues and pull requests and work on upstream. I think we're actually pretty close, and that's good because there's only 140 days left until the Python 2 end of life. And where I'd really like us to be is to be able to support both Python 2 and Python 3 by year end, so that we're not completely reliant on Python 2. We can execute on Python 3. And, again, as we've always worked, the goal is to be compatible with both, at least for a period of time, given the wide ranging use of Node, probably a very long time. So I've sort of led off the issue with 4 key recommendations, and those are that we should start using virtual EMs. Virtual environments are something that's now built into Python. Basically, what it lets us do is put down a version of Python in a virtual space, think of, well, like a Docker container, but even lighter than that. And then we own that Python. We can install our own dependencies. We can change the version. We can do whatever without affecting the underlying machine. So both for Node and for GIP, I think that we need to live in virtual environments. And I've written up some reasons why that's good, but it's the general trend. And then for issue number 3, I've said that we should really adopt the fork of GIP called GIP3, and we should use that because I have put in a lot of effort, and many others have put in a lot of effort, and that is a more modernized, more stable, already in a virtual env version of GIP. And then last but not least, something that Sam and others have been working on is making sure that all our build machines are able to do both Python 2 and Python 3. I think that's to our success. So any comments or questions so far?
The very first one was I mentioned in an update yesterday that we were working on Python 3 support, and one of the people's questions was like, "What? How is Python 3 used?" So just maybe a few words on how we use Python in terms of the node builds.
Yeah, so sort of increasingly my knowledge gets better about this world, but really Python is only used in the build phases of Node and Git, and you know, sort of once it's built and once it's up and running on the person's machine, Python disappears. You know, Python really has no need has no role in the ongoing execution of Node, right? Node runs by itself. And, you know, I think there's been a lot of discussion in the community to say, you know, why don't we just get rid of Python? And I'm not at all resistant to that idea. I think it's actually a better idea. But in the short term, we do have this problem that increasingly distros are dropping Python 2, and we're dependent on Python 2. So I think that's the place that we're at. But it's really not used in the runtime of Node. It's really used in the build steps.
Okay, and that's because of JIP or JIP and other reasons?
My sense is it's JIP and other reasons. There's a lot of dependency. There's a lot of Python code in the Node repo, and there's a lot of Python code in the GIP repo.
We use Python in the build tools and the test tools. Yeah. So it's sprinkled throughout the repository. I have a question about the virtual env. I'm sorry if this is a naive question, but does that mean that we would be shipping our own? Sorry, does that mean we would be shipping a node binary in a Python binary in the repository?
No.
Would it be like an equivalent of a Docker file or something? I'll stop muttering. Go ahead. Yes.
No. I think it's right on. And I think the idea is that whatever package manager we use on whatever platform, we will install in that way. So on a Mac, we would brew install, a virtual env. On an APT, we would APT install a virtual env. So it's done with the built-in package manager of the platform of choice.
After that sidetrack, that's good to just fill in the dependency. I guess, that was the only question. I was just wondering then if it's like back to like, are there specific things that you'd like to raise in terms of things that are underway or need priority or need help, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I've put a handful of PRs that have sort of been percolating around in different forms that we need to close out. But then, really, the thrust of what we need to do is the bottom of this, which is, we need to either migrate from Node JIP to JIP 3, or we need to continue to work on JIP 3. So I really need us to finalize that choice again. My sense of the knowledgeable folks is that they want to make the migration to JIP 3, but we need to move.
I'm glad to see we're having the GIF versus GIF of, but with GYP instead of GIF. Anyway, my understanding is that there's a pretty strong desire to make that happen. There are a couple of little, bureaucratic things that need to be, boxes that need to be checked off before we can do that. If anybody is aware of anything to the contrary, please speak up. But that's certainly my understanding.
That matches my understanding as well. Like, I haven't heard any opposition, and I see that, like Rich said, some of the things around, some legal due diligence, that kind of stuff are happening. So I would expect that it should happen.
And I would expect it sooner rather than later. Although, Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll call it generate your projects from now on.
well, fortunately, one of the things that might have to happen is we might need to rename it. But anyway, so that might actually work in our favor.
Fine. So some other places where help is needed. V8 is a dependency. that's got a fair amount of old Python in it. A lot of work has gone into that, but I'm going to need help there. As we find things in V8 that need to be changed, I'd like to be able to change them quickly, but also push back into V8 quickly. So help there.
On that front, is it that like the PRs, you're finding PRs, submitting them into the V8 source tree, and then we need to backport them? That's a while for reviews, or?
Yeah, so I think that process is slow, and I think if you look at the PR there, you'll see it's a rather long PR, and we worked at it for a long time. But there is nice movement there. Their process is highly different than GitHub, right? So
yeah.
I'm not really an expert on it, and we clearly have others in the community that can do that. So I will try to rely on them.
Okay.
So then there's the work on the build machines, and I think Sam and Ron are working that, and we need to continue to work that. Jenkins and Windows are two things I'm not strong in. So as we get into those spaces, I'm going to need help in Jenkins and Windows. But I think that covers it. We're really not so far away. I think we do need to figure out the generate your projects thing so that we can move forward. But I think this is a maintainable set of tasks in front of us.
Okay, that sounds good. So it sounds like key things is the resolve the JIP3 in a reasonable amount of time, and the other things, sort of help along the way will get us there.
Yep, and I am seeing a whole lot better responsiveness and cooperation and speed. So that's great. I think in the early days it was hard to see the finish line, and now I think as we get closer to the finish line, people are jumping in and being more reactive.
Does anybody else have any other questions, comments?
Thanks for coming and giving this update. This is really helpful and reassuring.
Good, my pleasure, my pleasure. Thanks for all the help that you guys have given me so far. Anything else?
If not, I guess thanks for coming, and we'll move back to our regular agenda.
Great.
Yep, thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to the things tagged for the agenda. The first one is add buffer harden method 28439. Chalker, do you want to give us an update as where we're on that one? And
yes, I added Mogars around that so that it could be only executed in the first tick of the process, like in the startup. That raised some controversy, I think. And another thing that still raised controversy is why not just command line flag or something like that. So for both things, for command line flag, I think that if we just add it as a command line flag, it will not gain as much adoption, and it will not cause the change in the ecosystem that it is supposed to cause. Like it won't get used so widely. And for the additional safeguards, so that it can be run only at the start of the process, I would like to merge it like that for at least now, and perhaps leave that in the future if that raises some problems in the setups. Like lifting that would be a server minor, and adding some restriction like that would be a server major. So I would prefer to. Okay.
A major difference between a command line flag and what you've proposed is that the command line flag is like the person who's running the app decides that, versus in the code, the application developer decides that, right? And that's, so I can see your argument that they're actually quite a different thing, and you're asking a different person. Like if the developer turns it on and sees that their dependencies have problems, they can work to try and fix that. Whereas if you're the command line, if you're the person running it, it's not as quite as close a link, at least in my mind, in terms of, what do they do with problems.
Yes, this is targeted for application developers. And I think that should be introduced as common flag, which would just not be used by them, and which will not cause any significant change in the ecosystem.
Right. So in terms of it being on the TSC agenda, is there something in particular we need the TSC members to discuss, or is it like go back and comment and review the change itself?
I think that discussing that each on GitHub would be fine, and we don't need a long discussion about that here. But I just want to raise awareness that there are some unresolved controversies about that, and it needs some way forward, I believe. But we can move that back to GitHub for now.
Okay, and it's okay to remove it from the agenda for now?
For today, yes, I think. But there is nothing else that I...
Yeah, I meant like, should I untag it, or should we leave it tagged so that it'll show up next week?
I would prefer it to show up next week because I hope that there will be a change by next week.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to say okay, so let's move on to the next issue, which is process improve next tick performance, which is 25.461. Is there somebody who's been active in that issue that wants to?
Nope. There's nobody who's been active in that issue. It's been between, but it's basically between, I believe, Brian White and who's the objector?
Anatoly?
Yeah. Is that yes, Anatoly. And neither of them are here, but GitHub stalled out, and they both have expressed the opinion that they feel like they've said what they need to say. So I'm of the opinion that this is very likely heading for a vote. Of course, we always like to avoid that, but this one's been open for quite a while and does not seem to be moving, and I don't have ideas as to how to get it moving. So my recommendation is that somebody volunteer to step up and facilitate the conversation, or else we move it to a vote. It's been on the agenda. It's been, you can see the history in GitHub.
Yeah, certainly from the history, I don't see. I think it's the question is a little bit better framed now, in that at least from my understanding, the key issue is the object you get from async hooks is the contract that you should get the actual object, which this PR changes, I think, in a particular instance. And if that is the contract, then that might be breaking the contract. But the last comment in the issue actually says that doesn't seem to be the contract in other places.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really helpful if we had like a defined team of async hooks folks to like weigh in on that who aren't Anatoly. Not just because it'd be nice to have more than one.
Yeah.
One but I don't know that we really do. I haven't checked to see who's on the async hooks team, even if there even is one. And
yeah, the activity there is, I'd say, a little bit stalled out.
There's 9 people on that team.
Just
a lot of people. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Good. The activity and discussion, the diagnostics working group on that front is, we don't have a current champion, which is one of the challenges. So yeah, I think it's well framed. It's whether somebody wants to put it to move for a vote or leave it stalled is probably the next step.
I motion for a vote.
Okay. So Rich motions for a vote.
I know we don't generally follow Robert's Rules of Order, but if anybody wants to second it, that would probably be useful.
I think we should wait for an answer from Anatoly to my and Brian's questions.
Okay, I'm fine. I'm fine waiting another week or whatever. That's fine.
Okay. Okay. Agreed.
So maybe let's just leave it on the agenda, leave it tagged, and move on.
Okay, if we want to. Okay, took those notes. Okay, so the next one is building with full IC by default, number 19214. This one I put on the agenda because there was some discussion in a thread that's been open quite a long time about full ICU. And just wanted to have it on the agenda here to see if we could get some feedback in terms of like, hey, turning it on by default, that's just do people have concerns, and if there's no concerns, maybe we can do it. If there are concerns, then maybe it's a non-starter. But trying to sort of get some direction back to the people participating in the issue from the TSC on that front. And the trade-off is basically that it's difficult. There are some challenges because we don't include full ICU, in that people writing code can't depend on it. With the flip side being that it increases the binary size. I think there was some discussion last week. I don't know if that, it was left on the agenda, so I don't know what the next steps were. Was it just to get more discussion this meeting?
Well, let's take a look at the minutes. Let me pull that up.
So there appears to be one comment from last week, but there was a couple of us that expressed concerns about doing this in last week's TSC meeting. So.
Yeah, so James framed it with, the concern is doubling the binary size. Jeremiah, doing this would require more builds. Miles, it would add 11 megabytes to the checkout, but the checkout is already 500 megabytes, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Yeah, but nothing was really decided.
Yeah, I guess those are I hear a number of different things. One is like, if we did a separate build, that would obviously be more builds. So that's a different direction than including.
That's what I had meant last week.
Right.
And I don't really see how we got.
Driving that was binary size. Although now that you mentioned source size, yes, it will. So the initial check-in is going to add some amount of size, but every subsequent check-in is going to add continually more and more also for updates.
It feels like, or rather, I wonder if to really get a resolution on this, like we have to sit down with the build people and the releasers and figure it out. But I don't know.
But I think I'd try and answer, try not we've had the discussion around having separate builds before, and I think there's a fairly good pushback to that.
We used to ship with full ICU, right? A long time ago.
I don't believe so.
I don't think so, is my recollection, which could be wrong, of course. But
I don't think so either. I think there was a lot of, when ICU was added, there was a lot of pushback about size at that point, and it's really hard to judge right now whether or not size is still a big issue.
Right. I don't want to. It'd be good to avoid having two contentious discussions, which would be an extra binary, and can we have it by default? I think it would almost be good to just say, like, is it feasible of turning on full ICU in the single binary we have today? And if we can, if we come to a no, that's just not going to happen, then it's like, okay, is an option having a second binary? But I think even that's going to be a contentious discussion. So if we, focusing on the, is it feasible at all to consider just turning it on in the binaries we have as the default? And if the answer is no, then that gives a, a starting point. Or if the answer is yes, then obviously that gives a path forward.
So do we have an idea of who would be someone who would say no? I mean, I imagine there are people who are going to say probably not or possibly not, but is there anybody who's going to say no, that's not a possibility? I wonder if we need more decisive and opinionated people.
we have enough data, right? Like we heard the double the binary size and add to the code size, but is that hard data, like, or is that something that would help people to have a strong opinion?
I think that we should have full ICU, personally, and if it's a problem, then maybe consider having some kind of stripped down version for some platforms. Not having full ICU means that strings behave differently in Node than they do in the web browser, and it's kind of strange and annoying to people. So I think we should tend towards consistency unless there's a really strong reason not to. Whereas before, I think we were considering ICU as a fringe feature, not as important as size. But I think we should switch that balance. Though I'm super not keen to have the build group responsible for more types of build artifacts. So
yeah. Yeah, I'll echo, that's where I'm tending. It's like, for consistency, it makes sense at this point. Would it make sense? I'm just thinking of different ideas. We could do some sort of informal poll, to get a feel. I don't know if people, don't want to speak up, but like, we could do a poll from the TSC members saying, are you opposed to adding it by default, or not, or what? How do people think that facilitating, figuring out how where we stand would make sense? I mean, our other alternatives to just open a PR that does it, have the discussion in the PR. That's unless that is a PR already.
I mean, if Sam is the only opinionated voice, and by opinionated, I don't really mean opinionated as much as someone who, is willing to go full +1 or full -1 on this. I mean, we might want to check. We might want to check in the mailing list just to involve the other 9 people who are on the TSC who aren't here. But 10 now because Frenzy dropped off. But anyway, but if Sam's the only one who has an opinion that is willing to go +1 or -1, then yeah, I think opening a PR makes sense, and let let the people who are -1 make their case in GitHub. Let's just expand the conversation to include the people who actually, care enough to or not care enough, but who happen to have the, opinions that, one way or the other to have a discussion and figure out which way to go.
Okay, so I'm taking a note that says I'll take an action to send an email on TCNA email list asking if there are objections to suggesting a PR be open to make IC full ICU the default and to have the conversation there.
And Nikita seems to be positive on opening a pull request.
Okay.
So,
are there any objections to that? Taking that as the next step?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's move on to the next issue then, which is nominating Beth 718. I don't think there's anything new, Rich, unless is there anything you wanted to share on that front?
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, I should not at this time. I think we should discuss a little bit in the private segment, and then we'll have news today. So.
Sounds perfect. Okay, so moving on to the strategic initiative review. So I am just opening that up. So I can get the list. Okay, so modules. I don't think we don't have miles. NAPI. Good news is that we've got a workshop at Node+JS Interactive, which will help us continue on the advocacy side there. Otherwise, we did have I think, well, it's maybe a week or two ago, we did have a new release of Node add-on API that added some new features. And there's a number of issues, PRs, which are working their way to be backported to 8 and 10 so that we can add them to Node add-on API. It's the wrapper themselves. It's basically turning on version 5 of an API with some additional functionality. Workers, did Anna make it on? I think so, right? Yes.
Yeah, I'm here, but I don't really have anything to update because I've been busy with the HTTP2 stuff.
Okay, sounds good. Core Mateo, we don't have this week. Jeremiah, new streams APIs.
Nothing to mention. Awaiting.
Okay. V8 currency, Michael, anything on that front?
Yes, I finished yesterday to prepare the backport of 7.6 for Node 12, so it should land in the next minor release next week, hopefully.
Okay. Sounds good. Open web standards, we don't have Miles or Joey. Python 3, we already had the update on. We don't have James, do we? Just want to make sure he's enjoying. No. Start performance and build resources. Rich?
So the Windows temp directory thing that I mentioned last week landed, so that's good. But yeah, focus now is on improving the Windows test story right now. This is getting a little far afield from what the strategic initiative was initially about, but I'm hopeful that at some point we'll work backwards to, how do we reasonably manage our resources, so I don't know if there's anything to put in the notes, but
okay.
There you go.
Okay, so I think that's the list of the Strategic initiatives. In terms of the next thing is the tracking issue with the CPC update on the board meetings. There is a board meeting, I believe it's on August 23rd, which would not be this week, but the week after. So if you have any issues, let me know. The one issue that was mentioned before is around JIP3 and some questions for the legal team. I believe, Matteo's been leading that. I believe they've been answered actually from the foundation side. So that's, I think, on track. And I'm not aware of any other things that, I should be discussing on that front. The one thing on the CPC front, since we don't have Matteo, I will call to attention, and maybe we should discuss a little bit, is the proposal which is out there to basically move the travel fund from the sort of admin CPC ComCom level to the CPC level in the OpenJS Foundation. And we definitely want feedback from the ComCom and the TSC on that. So I guess, from the people here, are there some any concerns that should be voiced, discussed? Are people aware of that, have read it, and are comfortable? So is anybody, I'll ask specifically, is anybody here opposed to moving the travel fund to the CPC level? So basically, the approvals would be done by the CPC, and it would be a common travel fund for the Node project and the other OpenJS projects, I think is the initial suggestion. There's other alternatives which are possibilities, but that's the starting point that's being suggested.
And if anyone has a problem, they should probably log it as a comment in GitHub, right?
Yeah, basically jump into those issues. Just want to, I want to make sure that if there are any concerns, we get those out there. So yeah, we don't necessarily need to discuss now, but if you do have them, either let, Matteo or myself know, jump into the issues. Otherwise, I guess from this side of the report, there weren't any concerns voiced. And if we don't see anything in those issues, the assumption will probably be that the TSC is okay with that. Any other, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, and especially because if we end up deciding that, it is beneficial to have our own travel fund or our own fund for anything, we can always ask for a separate fund. So, we
can ask for it.
Yeah, it's always an option, but I don't think we actually need it. So
I think that was a good time to go through. If we thought, for example, we wanted our own, it would be a good time to have that discussion now versus at some later point. But as Rich said, we could also always ask for it later on if we find that we were wrong. But the key thing now, from my perspective, is that we from the Node, that if we know that if there are concerns or objections, we know what they are so that they can be brought up and addressed. Otherwise, we'll likely move forward. Any other questions or comments on that one? Okay, I think that's it for the public section of the TC meeting today. So let's call it a close. Thanks for everybody who's watching, and I'm going to stop the stream.